There is only one question you must ask yourself. Am I fortunate? Punk, do you? It has been regarded as one of the most significant police dramas in history. An iconic character who would become ingrained in American society forever, and a movie that revolutionized the genre. Half a century later, this contentious masterwork continues to spark intense discussion. Harry is filthy. Millions of moviegoers consider this grim, unapologetic portrayal of a renegade police officer to be among the most influential movies of the 1970s. What if I told you, however, that beneath its well-known exterior is a universe of mysteries that not even the most ardent admirers have discovered? We're revealing some of the most heavily guarded secrets about Dirty Harry today. Cast and crew members who helped make this iconic tale a reality share their insights. The underlying themes, the opening conflicts, and the symbolic elements woven throughout the movie that fundamentally alter your perception of Harry Callahan's journey. These are not trivial facts. Over the years, these significant insights have been disclosed by the players themselves. From Andrew Robinson's covert methods that gave life to the unsettling Scorpio killer, to Clint Eastwood's unexpected revelations about his iconic character, to the moments that were cut out that would have completely changed the meaning of the movie. Here's Dirty Harry's secret tale. By the end of our time together, you will have a completely different perspective on Dirty Harry, the movie that nearly failed. We must comprehend something extraordinary before we can delve into the cast disclosures. Almost never did Dirty Harry visit theaters. It wasn't called Dirty Harry when Harry Julian Fink and his wife Rita M. Fink's original screenplay initially appeared in Hollywood. Dead Right was the title, and it took place in New York City rather than San Francisco. Surprisingly, Clint Eastwood was not the target audience for the writing. In a 30th anniversary interview, Eastwood himself disclosed that he was actually the fifth candidate to play Harry Callahan. Eastwood claimed that Harry was going to be played by Frank Sinatra. They went to John Wayne, Robert Mitchum, and Paul Newman after him. Before the script reached me, each of them passed. Before it ever started, the initiative was all but destroyed by this wave of rejection. Not many people are aware that Sinatra had truly agreed to star, even attending early costume fittings. He dropped out, according to the official narrative, because of a hand injury that would make it difficult for him to handle Harry's enormous .44 Magnum. There is more to the story than that, though. Cast members later disclosed that after reading updated drafts of the script, Sinatra allegedly grew more uneasy about the film's politics and Harry's violent tactics. Although he later acknowledged that it was one of his worst career decisions, John Wayne's justification for declining the job was intriguing. Despite what many people thought, he didn't object to the film's politics. "I felt Harry was too mean," Wayne subsequently wrote in his memoirs. He relished causing harm to others, not because he was a conservative. The character required more empathy. As the film's eventual director, Don Siegel, revealed in his memoirs, this difficult start actually influenced the finished product. Since so many well-known people had rejected the concept, the studio was less inclined to get involved. They didn't think it would be a big hit, so we had more creative flexibility. This absence of studio interference would be important. At the time of his eventual acceptance of the role, Eastwood was not the current megastar. He was well known for the television series Rawhide and spaghetti westerns. For him, Dirty Harry was a huge professional gamble. Years later, Eastwood acknowledged, "This uncertain beginning set the stage for what would become one of Hollywood's most influential and controversial films. If the film failed or had caused too much controversy, my career in American films might have been finished." A project that would forever change the police drama genre and Eastwood's career. The true inspirations behind Dirty Harry. This is where it gets really interesting. The cast and crew of the film insisted for decades that Harry Callahan was a work of fiction that was only the product of the writer's imagination. But they weren't telling the whole truth. The real story slowly surfaced through interviews and retrospectives over time. Harry Callahan was not a fictional character. Rather, he was based in part on the life of a real San Francisco police inspector named Dave Shee, who was well known for his work on the Zodiac Killer case. Clint Eastwood disclosed in an interview from 2008 that Harry Callahan was partially based on David Shee. Eastwood remarked, "That's where we got the idea for Harry's distinctive way of carrying his weapon, meaning that Shee carried his handgun in an unorthodox upside-down shoulder holster. The analogy created by this relationship is unsettling. Shee was hunting the real Zodiac Killer, while Harry, the imaginary character, was running after Scorpio." The admission by screenwriter John Milius, who was hired for rewrites, that some of Harry's traits were modeled by an Oakland police officer called Gus Carreras was even more unexpected. Carreras was well known for his unconventional approaches and disagreements with authority. Milius clarified that he supported a more straightforward approach to justice than the system occasionally permitted. Harry's annoyance with administrative roadblocks gains a degree of authenticity from this real-life influence. However, the most startling disclosure was probably made by Andrew Robinson, who portrayed the psychotic murderer Scorpio. In a 40th anniversary interview, Robinson verified what many had suspected. Scorpio was purposefully designed to resemble the real-life Zodiac killer, who terrorized the San Francisco Bay region from 1968 to 1969 but was never apprehended. It wasn't a coincidence, Robinson said. Many of the same sites where the actual Zodiac crimes occurred were also used to film the movie. The sequence in which Scorpio burying the abducted girl alive was shot close to Lake Beressa, the site of one of the Zodiac assaults. This relationship made the studio bosses very nervous. They purposefully minimized these real-life influences, out of fear of possible controversy or even legal problems. Nonetheless, San Francisco locals, who had experienced the Zodiac's reign of terror, could not deny the similarities. After the movie came out, Robinson got death threats because of how convincing his performance was. "Perhaps I performed too well," Robinson remembered, grimacing. "The studio had to hire security for me after the film's debut, because certain uneasy fans couldn't let go of the character." This is all the more amazing given that Robinson was a kind, theater-trained actor who detested violence and had never handled a pistol before filming the movie. According to Robinson, "I had to mentally travel to some extremely dark areas in order to get ready for Scorpio. In an attempt to comprehend the skewed thinking of real killers, I looked over their case files. I didn't really get over the character until almost a year after the shoot. Because of this commitment, one of the most unsettling villains in movies was born." Our interpretation of the movie is altered by these discoveries. It wasn't only an action film, Dirty Harry. San Francisco had been scarred by very genuine occurrences, which were dramatized in response. The genuine search for the Zodiac killer that had terrified the city was reflected in Harry and Scorpio's game of cat and mouse. The picture has a sense of urgency and tension that is rarely found in purely fictitious narratives because of this connection to reality. Tensions behind the scenes that influenced the movie, a project characterized by creative disagreements that ultimately shaped the film we know today, lay behind the seemingly seamless production. The screenplay itself was when the tensions started. The Finn's initial script, which portrayed Harry as an unquestionable hero, was far more right-wing in its ideology. New authors were brought in by director Don Siegel to offer greater moral nuance. During his autobiography, Siegel noted, "I didn't want Harry to be a simple hero. I wanted the audience to support him while yet challenging his tactics." There was instant conflict with some of the actors because of this strategy. Eastwood often argued with Siegel about Harry's portrayal, since he had his own ideas about the character. Don wanted Harry to be more visibly troubled by his actions. Years later, Eastwood divulged, "I thought that would make the character less strong." Harry had to remain unrepentant about his tactics, even if they were questioned by the audience. On set, these arguments caused some stressful situations. In the well-known scene where Harry stands on Scorpio's broken leg to torture him, in order to obtain information about a girl who has been abducted, Siegel sought to capture the brutality of Harry's behavior. To let viewers determine if Harry's actions were warranted, Eastwood advocated for a more ambiguous approach. Buddy Van Horn, the assistant director, recalls, "We actually shot that scene multiple ways. Some interpretations made Harry appear cruel by emphasizing Scorpio's agony. Others centered on Harry's resolve to keep the girl safe. Don's and Clint's visions were compromised to create the version that was ultimately shown in the movie." Other production-related elements were also affected by this creative strain. Behind the scenes, a flurry of dispute erupted about how the movie depicted police practices. When their recommendations clashed with the filmmaker's vision, several of the real San Francisco police officers who worked as advisors were disregarded. In fact, some consultants took their names off the credits. Production helper Wade Preston recalled that one consultant was very displeased with Harry's disrespect for appropriate evidence gathering. He would often add, "No cop would contaminate a crime scene like that." Siegel would just reply, "That's precisely the point." The well-known bank robbery sequence that starts the movie also caused controversy. Harry doesn't play by those rules. Siegel preferred a simple action scene, but Eastwood insisted on including the now famous, "Do you feel lucky?" comment. At first, the studio execs detested the conversation. That speech wasn't in the original script, noted Eastwood. When I presented it on set, the crew fell silent. I rewrote it the night before filming, because I felt we needed something that would immediately tell the audience who Harry was. They were aware that we were unique. That spontaneous moment became one of the most famous movie lines ever, and the studio officials finally gave in. Possibly the biggest internal struggle was over the movie's conclusion. There was a whole different ending in the original script, one that would have fundamentally altered our perception of Harry Callahan. Similar to the finale of High Noon, Harry tosses his badge into the ocean after killing Scorpio in this possible ending, expressing his anger at the system he is a part of. Eastwood put a lot of effort into this conclusion. Editor Carl Pingater disclosed. Despite his belief that it was more true to the character's path, studio executives stepped in, arguing that it would be inappropriate to have a police officer refuse his badge at a moment of social turmoil. The compromise was the now familiar conclusion, in which Harry continues to serve on the force, in spite of his annoyances. A lesser production might have failed due to these creative difficulties, but Dirty Harry's tension and intricacy improved the material. A direct result of these behind-the-scenes disputes was the film's ambiguity, which lets audiences support or criticize Harry's strategies. This turned what could have been a simple action movie into something far more complex and thought-provoking. The unspoken meaning that most fans were unaware of. On their first few viewings, most viewers, even die-hard fans, completely miss the visual meaning that is buried throughout Dirty Harry. Over the years, interviews with the cast and crew have unveiled some of these hidden meanings, changing our perception of important scenes. Harry's .44 Magnum is arguably the most important symbolic component. It is a weapon that becomes an extension of the persona. As armorer Burt Lovett said, the pistol wasn't merely a prop. Clint and Don Siegel picked it out with care, since it reflected something particular about Harry. It is so big and intimidating that it is practically unusable for real police operations. Cinematographer Bruce Surtees, who created the film's unique visual aesthetic, unveiled another level of significance in Harry's filmmaking techniques. Surtees clarified, "We purposefully framed Eastwood in isolation in nearly every scene. To visually distinguish him from other people, even in busy spaces, we prepared photos. This visual decision is made numerous times throughout the movie, to show Harry as an outsider who doesn't belong in either society or the system. This realization changes your perception of Harry's basic alienation from the outside world when you rewatch." Color symbolism is also very important. According to costume designer Glenn Wright, Harry purposefully chose an outfit that was primarily composed of browns and greens to contrast with the blue police uniforms wearing by other policemen. Wright pointed out that his use of color visibly distinguishes him from his peers. Despite being a member of the force, he is completely unique. Unbeknownst to most spectators, the film's use of places has deeper importance. The city of San Francisco itself appears in the movie as a character, although not in the way that is usually done. The city's construction sites, incomplete structures, and regions undergoing change are frequently included in Siegel, rather than famous sites, like the Golden Gate Bridge. Eastwood makes nuanced decisions in his portrayal based on this backstory. Eastwood noted that viewers should take note of Harry's constant alertness and attentiveness throughout the movie. It's not only police alertness. He always had a militaristic demeanor. Additionally, this military background clarified Harry's unease with the shifting social climate of the early 1970s. Having grown up in the more inflexible 1950s, he was now negotiating a society that was beginning to challenge authority. Above all, Eastwood created a sad personal past for Harry that is only alluded to in the movie. I added more details, but the script only stated that Harry's wife had passed away. I pictured her being struck by someone, who was later released on a technicality, and murdered in a drunk driving accident. This made-up narrative fueled Harry's visceral resentment of the legal system, and clarified why he took some cases so personally. In order to produce Scorpio, Andrew Robinson adopted an even deeper psychological approach. According to Robinson, "I gave him a whole history of rejection and abuse, not to justify his behavior, but to comprehend the sickness that underlies it." In order to examine Scorpio's deranged mental processes, Robinson even composed journal entries in character. "One thing I established for myself was that Scorpio had been rejected from military service for psychological reasons," Robinson stated. "He's pretending to be a soldier, which satisfies his power fantasies, which is why he dons an army jacket and a military hairstyle. This feature gives Scorpio's appearance and actions a new meaning." Renee Santon, who portrayed Chico, Harry's sidekick, also created a deep biography for his character. Chico was the first person in his family to enroll in college, and later to become a police officer. The values of his traditional Mexican-American family and his desire to excel in a largely white institution are at odds, Santini revealed, especially in situations where Chico has to balance Harry's unconventional tactics with departmental regulations. This tension influenced the performance. In order to influence his portrayal of the mayor, John Vernon wrote a political background for the role. I decided the mayor was in his first term, having run on a progressive platform that emphasized police accountability, Vernon stated. Harry Gardino, who portrayed Harry's long-suffering supervisor, Lieutenant Breller, disclosed that he envisioned a lengthy professional history between Breller and Callahan. That's why he's so concerned with procedure and public perception. His political identity is built around being a reformer. This backstory added depth to what could have been a one-dimensional bureaucratic obstacle. In my mind, Breller had been Harry's partner years ago, before being promoted, Gardino stated. For this reason, he puts up with Harry's disobedience. This cultural conflict was exactly where Dirty Harry landed. Don Siegel, the director, later thought back on this conflicted response. For making it, some people called me a monster and a fascist. I was hailed as a hero by others for speaking out against crime. The point was lost on both. The movie didn't dictate what viewers should think. It prompted them to reflect. Eastwood appeared somewhat aback by how strong the criticism was. We weren't expressing any political views. In a 1973 interview, he insisted, a detective story, a thriller, was what we were creating. We had no intention of communicating, but because it depicted actual conflicts in American society, the movie undoubtedly touched a nerve. Dirty Harry, whether or not it was meant to be political commentary, turned into a referendum on important issues pertaining to justice, law enforcement, and the appropriate boundaries of power. This divisive response contributed to the film's cultural significance being solidified. It wasn't merely amusement. It was a cultural event that made Americans face their own perspectives on difficult problems. The video was ambiguous and complex enough to be interpreted as either a leftist critique of police excess or a conservative endorsement of harsh policing. These critical evaluations, which were made 50 years ago, are nevertheless intriguing documents of a divided America. And many of the problems they raise are still being discussed in our culture today. When it comes to justice and policing, the film's legacy is more nuanced than you may imagine. Given that Dirty Harry is getting up to its 55th anniversary, one would wonder why. In a time when other action movies from the same era have become largely forgotten, this one has managed to capture fans' attention so strongly. The film's ability to go beyond its genre holds part of the solution. The film transformed what could have been a straightforward criminal thriller into a far more thought-provoking Rorschach test that exposed the audience's own beliefs about authority, justice, and social order. It amazed me that the picture was loved for diverse reasons by people on opposite sides of the political spectrum. In a retrospective interview, Eastwood made the observation, Harry was viewed as a hero by conservatives who opposed bureaucracy and criminal coddling. The movie was viewed by progressives as a cautionary tale about the perils of vigilante justice and police abuse. Which interpretation is right is never made clear in the movie. This uncertainty was deliberate. We wanted to raise questions, not answer them. Is Harry a hero or a dangerous extremist? Is his approach necessary or a threat to civil liberties? Director Don Siegel said, prior to his death, the film poses the subject without providing a solution. The impact of the movie on cinema has been significant and wide-ranging. A new model for police dramas was created by Dirty Harry, and it is still used today. Prior to Harry Callahan, Sherlock Holmes-style cinematic detectives were usually either simple heroes or intelligent problem solvers. The number of morally complex, mentally disturbed law enforcement figures who were prepared to break the law in order to obtain justice increased after Harry. In the absence of Harry Callahan, renowned cinema historian Leonard Maltin, Martin Riggs in Lethal Weapon, Popeye Doyle in The French Connection, and John Lann in Die Hard would exist. The rogue police stereotype, which dominated action movies for decades, was established by Harry. With its use of real locations, natural lighting, and documentary-style camera work, Dirty Harry's visual aesthetic impacted a generation of filmmakers. Prior to this movie, the majority of police dramas were filmed mostly on studio lots, with carefully calibrated lighting and tidy compositions. Audiences now equate a gritty image with realism, because to Dirty Harry, the dialogue in the movie, especially Harry's famous words, have become so ingrained in American culture that even those who haven't watched it can quote it. Expressions such as, "Do I feel lucky?" "Well, do you, punk?" and "A man's got to know his limitations" have transcended their origins to become cultural shorthand. Most importantly, Dirty Harry altered Clint Eastwood's professional path. Prior to this movie, he was mostly seen as an action star with a short range. Later, he started to play increasingly challenging parts, and eventually transitioned into directing. The Eastwood who helmed pensive classics like Million Dollar Baby, Mystic River, and Unforgiven might not exist without Harry Callahan. Harry Callahan provided me with the opportunity to experiment with more difficult content. Eastwood admitted, "I was able to take chances that I normally couldn't have because of the film's success." The most important legacy of Dirty Harry may be his transition from action hero to renowned filmmaker and ultimately Oscar winner. Regarding topics that are still relevant today, the movie continues to spark discussion. The obligations of institutions versus individuals, the appropriate boundaries of law enforcement, and the harmony between security and civil liberties. These issues are just as pressing today as they were in 1971, which is why the movie keeps resonating with younger audiences. Andrew Robinson provided what was arguably the most perceptive analysis of the movie's enduring influence. The fact that Dirty Harry offers solutions makes it unsatisfactory. The fact that it makes us face difficult issues that still affect us now, like justice and power, makes it fantastic. You are not told what to think by great art. It gets you to reflect. We're still discussing Dirty Harry decades later because of what he does. In conclusion, this concludes our exploration of the mysteries surrounding Dirty Harry. These insights provide us a fresh perspective on this historic film, from its turbulent origins to its significant cultural influence, from the character's real-life inspirations to the subliminal messages interwoven throughout. One of the most enduring characters in film is Clint Eastwood's Harry Callahan. Contradictory, fascinating, and complex. A simple police thriller turned into something much more important, a cultural landmark that still sparks discussion and reflection 50 years after it was first published. The film's complex history is reflected in its path, from a contentious start to a lasting classic. Dirty Harry defies simple classification. Just like Harry, it pushes us to consider the underlying issues rather than just the obvious. If you liked this look into Dirty Harry's secret past, please subscribe and use the like button for more in-depth analyses of vintage Hollywood productions. We're committed to learning the backstories of the films that influenced filmmaking today and changed our culture. Please share any behind-the-scenes information you may have, or your favorite Dirty Harry moment in the comments section below. Our next topic is a controversial movie from the same time period, and we promise you won't believe what the studio attempted to hide. We'll see you in the future video, and thanks for watching.